Well, hey everybody, happy Wednesday night. My name is West, host of the Burkean Conservative, and this is the second week that we are doing this. So we have our Conservatism on Tap show every Sunday night. We're starting to have our Refounding Fathers show every Sunday night, which is a lot of fun. But on Wednesdays, I get a chance just to talk to you directly and answer any questions that you have, or if there's stuff that you want to talk about, let me know in the comments. We'll be happy to go through it. So just a quick episode, good chance to kind of catch up in the middle of the week and see how, what's on your mind, tell you guys what I've been thinking about. What I started doing was I put out a post in the afternoon every Wednesday that says, what topics would you like us to feature? And I got to tell you guys, I know when you see conservative up here, you think politics and all that, but we can talk philosophy, religion, culture, art, whatever you want to talk about. This whole thing, you talk about Edmund Burke behind me here, and why we call ourselves the Burkean Conservative is because this was a guy who lived in the 18th century, and he's just a very inspiring Christian philosopher, politician, author, educator, all of these things. And there's just so much to like about this guy, and he really shows how someone can have a very strong moral center and be in the messy world of politics as well as in academia and just intellectual thought, so many other things, and be right on so many issues. And so that's why we named the channel what we did. But it opens us up to being able to talk about pretty much anything, because I can bring it back to this guy and tell you what he would probably say on it, at least what I think he would say on it. I can give you my personal opinion on it, and I love hearing yours. So we'll put this post out every Wednesday, and then of course you can always just message me and say, hey Wes, I want you to talk about this, or I want you to talk about that on your next show, and we'll be happy to do it, or we'll fit it into our Sunday night shows, just depending on what it is. So looking at a couple of the comments that came in already, Veronica, I see you there. Hi from Colorado. Hey, that's awesome. So just so you know, I'm living in Florida here, so I am jealous. You probably got snow up there, or at least some cold weather. Down here in Florida, we don't quite have all of that, but I do have some hot chocolate, so I'm enjoying that, and I'm pretending like it's true fall. But in Florida, it kind of always looks the same. So, but I'm happy to have you here, Veronica. And yours is actually one of the ones that we picked for tonight. And you asked what constitutes a pandemic and what are the criteria to say it is no longer a pandemic. These governors need to lose their, quote, emergency powers. And I hear you, Veronica. I mean, this whole COVID thing has been confusing from start to finish. It's difficult. I mean, where I work, we are starting to put masks back on. I think we just heard the other day that now we have to wear them even when we're sitting at our desks, and even if nobody's around, which is tough for me to get my head around. We want to do things like having a potluck, which we do every Thanksgiving at our job. We can't. We just told that was shut down. We want to play kickball. We Friday afternoons, we traditionally have always either played dodgeball or kickball or ultimate football or something like that. We can't do that. We can't do that because all the COVID guidance and everything else and restrictions are coming down. I know everybody is feeling that. People know folks who are tested positive, and that's tough. And then there's this whole question of when is this going to end and how are we going to handle this, and the fact that it's worse in some areas and not others, but it seems like the whole world is having to buckle back down. I look forward to a vaccine. I think it's coming pretty soon in the next few months. I think that's certainly going to help. But I can't. I don't want to sugarcoat it for you, Veronica. It's tough, and how you handle it, I think, can be very tough. And a lot of the states are doing things again very differently. And so, some governors are probably, I would assume, using their emergency powers well, and others are probably not. And there's smart things that we can do to handle this without overreacting, especially for the people who are high risk. And then there's other folks who, they get it and they're fine, or they don't have any symptoms at all. And we need to be sensitive to that too. So it's a balance. It's a balance between protecting those who are most vulnerable and then letting other folks get back to work to help the economy recover. So it's hard to say. It's really hard to say when it's no longer a pandemic, short of the vaccine coming out. And I'm looking forward to that. But I really think that you have to look at the data. And I've really said this from the beginning. We had shows when COVID first hit. And one of the things that I was saying was, a national shutdown, in my opinion, doesn't make a lot of sense because, in areas like New York, they got hit really hard. So, yeah, I get it. If you want to shut down there, that makes a little bit more sense. But then you had places that were like, rural, suburban, country, that type of thing. And it really didn't make sense. So you look at like South Dakota, they're just now getting hit pretty hard months and months later, and they really didn't have any restrictions, and now they're getting hit hard. So, maybe shutting down a few things there or pulling back a little bit there, having some more restrictions there at this time makes sense, but it certainly didn't at the beginning. And unfortunately, that's what happens. Of course, that's hindsight, and it's 2020, so it's hard to say what we should have done. But going forward, I think that when we look at what constitutes a pandemic, it has to be very specific. You look at specific areas and the number of cases, the number of people in ICU, the number of people that are, dying, that type of thing. And you say, okay, that area may be suffering from a pandemic, but then many of these others are not. And why should they be subject to the same restrictions? So it's a balancing act, and then it's tough for everybody. But I can tell you, I don't enjoy like wearing a mask sitting at my computer by myself, and I'm not sure how much that helps. So there's frustrations all around. So I hope that kind of answers your questions, or at least gives you my take. Another one that I got is from William Smith. So this is an old friend of mine from high school. And he said one thing that got touched on in both debates, talking about the presidential debates, is the idea that Biden plans to pack the Supreme Court. For those like me not in the know, what would the process for that look like, assuming Biden is inaugurated in January? And what will Republicans possibly try to do to stop it? So I think there's at least two questions, really three in this. So a lot to talk about. So I kind of want to take this full episode in the next like 10 minutes to kind of explain all that. I did a little research on it and kind of break down what he's talking about. So William is talking about how during the presidential debates, Trump and Biden talked about the Supreme Court. They talked about whether Barrett should have been confirmed, and they really hit Biden pretty hard, especially Trump did. And then I believe Pence brought it up at one point in the vice presidential debate that the Democrats were planning to pack the court, and they wouldn't say no. Harris wouldn't say no. Biden wouldn't say no. So you could tell they were kind of like leaving it as an option that we might pack the court. And I want to explain what that means and why they said it. And could it happen? So we're going to go through that. So I made a little agenda here of going through these questions, and I'd love to get your feedback on them. And hopefully at the end of it, we kind of understand a little bit better. So first of all, what are we talking about exactly? When we talk about what is court packing, we're talking about the Supreme Court, obviously. The 9 justices are on it. So this is an older photo. Obviously, it's changed in the past few months, past few years, definitely with new justices. But you think about 9 justices on the Supreme Court. Now, there hasn't always been 9 justices on the Supreme Court, but over the past 100 years plus, that's been the case. There's been 8 justices plus 1 Chief Justice, that's Roberts there in the middle, who are on the court. And these are the people who make the decisions. 9's a good number because, if you have differences of opinion, you have a split, it comes down to 5-4, pretty easy to resolve. If you had 8, it'd be tough because you could have a 4-4 split decision. That could be a problem. And so when we talk about packing the Supreme Court, it's literally the president working with Congress to add justices to the Supreme Court. So you add 1 more, now you've got 10. And you could have a split with a 5-5. You could have 11. You could have 12, going all the way up. You could have numerous justices. So why would you want this? Well, you think about what Trump has done with the Supreme Court. He's had Barrett, he's had Gorsuch, he's had Kavanaugh added during his first term, right? So Trump added these 3 justices, which has swayed the court in a much more conservative, right-leaning direction. So the idea that a Biden, administration could change this is going to be very difficult because these justices serve for life. And so unless you have some retire or you have some pass away, you're not going to get the opportunity to put more justices on the Supreme Court the traditional way, especially some of these younger conservative justices who are relatively younger versus some of the other ones that have passed away recently, right? And so it's unlikely that they're going to be going anywhere anytime soon. And so liberals want to be able to change the court. They can't really do that under the current structure. So you pack it, the liberals would do it in order to add more justices to the Supreme Court. Now all of a sudden you've got 6, 7, 8 liberal justices on the Supreme Court that outnumber the conservatives that Trump put on. So that's why they would want it. That's what it is. Let's get to the next question of, is it constitutional? Can they do it? Can they actually do this? And what's wild and maybe surprising is that they actually can, according to the Constitution. So when you get into Article 3, Section 1 of the Constitution, it really doesn't tell you that there has to be 9 justices. It just says there is one Supreme Court, and that is the court of the land, and that appoints some of the lower courts. So there's nothing in the Constitution that says that, oh, if you wanted to, you could or could not pack the court with additional justices and change that. That is totally up to Congress and the president to do. And that's what liberals are talking about is, hey, there's nothing saying that we can't do this short of a bill which they could change. However, there has been a norm, as I've said, going back to 1869, that there have been 9 justices. So they would be breaking a judicial historical norm, and it would be big, big news if they were to get that bill through, if they were to get justices on the court. It would be changing how the court has functioned for well over 100 years. But again, not necessarily an issue with the Constitution. Has it been tried before? I think you might find this interesting in that it has, by this guy. So FDR, 1937, tried to pack the court. And why he did this is very interesting, is he was essentially trying to get the New Deal through. He was trying to get his legislation through for this, and the courts were striking it down. So he wanted to be able to spend a lot of money. He was trying to get the country out of the Great Depression, and he wanted to do it any way he possibly could. And the courts were saying, no, 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 you can't do it this way. You can't spend as much as you have. You can't set up all of these different government functions without, changing the Constitution. All of these things. They were reading the laws that he was signing and saying, nope, that's illegal. And so he said, well, what I want to do is I want to change the court. And he wanted to give, in a bill called the Judicial Procedures Reform Bill of 1937, he wanted to give himself the power to be anyone over the age of 70, which would effectively allow him to appoint several judges. However, that bill didn't survive in the Senate. It just sat there and ultimately never made it into law. Sat there for, I believe, over 100 days. They never acted on it. During that time, FDR was reelected, and he also got the opportunity to replace a few judges during his second term, which allowed him to change the court fundamentally and get it to a point where there were more justices in his favor. So he never had to pack the court, but he certainly tried to, and he proved that it could be done pretty easily. That's really the only time the court's been packed in the past 100 years before they really set that precedent. So will Democrats do it? Let's talk about that. Well, they would need the Senate, and they don't have it. And that's really the rub here, is that when Biden was in the presidential debate and he was talking to Trump and he was saying, you know what, I'm keeping my options open about this court packing thing, it was because he didn't know whether Democrats were going to win the Senate or not. They actually thought they were going to win the Senate and have the majority there pretty handedly, and that's not really the case that we're seeing. It's increasingly likely that the Republicans are going to hold on to the Senate. Democrats are not going to have it. We'll see how the recounts go in Georgia, but it's very likely that the Republicans will have it. And if they do, they would have to sign off on any bill that went to the president. There's a judicial committee in the Senate that would have to sign off on that. And of course, you're not going to sign off on a bill that would allow Democrats to pack the court. So had Biden won the election with Democrat control of the Senate and maintaining the House, where they did hold on to the House, they possibly could have been able to do this. But it's unlikely that they would do it now. However, there are more elections that are happening next 2 years, next 4 years, and if Democrats ever did control essentially all of Congress and the presidency, they could make this happen. The same thing for Republicans. There was a time when Trump had Republicans in the Senate and the House, and he could have done this as well. He could have gotten something like this through. But again, that violates those norms. When we talk about norms, really the last thing I want to share with you guys is there has been an erosion of judicial norms for the past, going back to really to 2013. that's been pretty wild. Is if you look at, back in 2013, Democrats eliminated what's called the filibuster for circuit court justices. The filibuster is when a senator gets up there and just talks and talks and talks to prevent a vote, and that way a minority in the Senate can continue talking, which prevents a majority from getting what they want done. So you get somebody up there and they just talk and talk and talk to keep the other party from getting what they want done. They took that out when it came to circuit court justices. And then in 2017, Republicans did the same thing, is they took away the filibuster for Supreme Court nominees. So what the Democrats could have done, if they still had that in place, is they could have kept Barrett from getting confirmed, because they could have just kept talking and talking and talking for days, weeks on end to the vote for Barrett until the election was over. And so that was removed. Those were norms that had been set in place to allow a senator or a group of senators to hold up a vote if they really strongly disagreed. That's over now. That's over now. So we're seeing a lot of these norms erode. And that's ultimately what we're talking about when we come to packing the court, is that's a norm of not doing that has existed for 100 years. I'm curious to get your thoughts. Going back to William's question on this, and I'll bring it back up. What would the process look like? The process would look like one party really just ejecting the norms of this, having the power to do that. And what would Republicans do to stop it? They could, as long as they have the Senate, there's a lot they could do to stop it. But Republicans themselves could do it if things were to swing back the other way. Should it be done? Should it be done? There are actually some scholars I was reading who think that it should be done, who think that we should have that power, and it makes the court much more kind of a pawn of the other branches of government. And then there's some who think that it shouldn't be done, that we should maintain that norm, and they think that it's been working. So I'm curious to get your thoughts on that. Let me know. Send me some messages. We can talk about that. I would tell you guys that it's not really something that concerns me at this point, because the government is split. And when we were doing our election night coverage, we were talking about that. We were talking about how I gave the opinion that I think it's a good thing that we could have a Biden administration, but a Republican Senate to be able to balance that out. I like it in the government when there are competing powers, because that's really how our founders intended it, is for different branches of government to be forced to work with each other, and it prevents one side from having to change things for themselves. And then whenever things swing back the other way, which they always do, then the other folks get that. When it comes to the issue of being pro-life, I also think that this is something that everyone should consider, is even if the Supreme Court was to overturn Roe v. Wade, which is something that I really hope happens, would that victory be permanent? And if, we kind of open up this whole court packing thing, then it never really is, right? And so that's certainly something to consider, is even if it was done to help, the pro-life cause at some point, it could just as easily be used to overturn it much later. And so having kind of these norms in place is a good thing, even if they're tough to overcome. So anyway, that's kind of a long answer to William's question. Those are really the only two ones that I had tonight. We've got a couple more that came through. We're going to hold those for Sunday. So if you've got more stuff you want us to talk about, again, let us know. Don't forget, theburkeanconservative.com is our website. We've also, obviously, on Facebook. We're on YouTube. If you just search for the Burkean Conservative on YouTube, you'll find our channel there. We're on Twitter. We're on Instagram as well. Happy to engage with you guys. Happy to talk about whatever you guys want. So just let us know. Hit us up with some comments, questions, and we'll be happy to get into those next time. Thanks, guys. Have a great night. Great rest of the week. We'll see you Sunday.